Welcome in, everybody. Another edition, a Week 12 edition, college football betting. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is ready for what should be a fun look ahead to what should be an interesting weekend in college football. Now, the problem with it being the week before Thanksgiving is a couple things. One, we are a week away from some of the biggest games of the season, obviously headlined next week by Michigan, Ohio State. The problem being, of course, that a lot of the marquee teams do not play big games this weekend. Alabama's playing Austin Peay. LSU's playing UAB. Texas A&M, which, yeah, they're marquee. They may not be good, but they're marquee. They are playing UMass. So the slate looks a little bit different this week, but there are obviously still some big games. USC-Utah, Oregon, or USC-UCLA, Oregon, Utah, even a couple in the SEC, Georgia, Kentucky. We have Michigan, Illinois in the Big Ten. So a busy week, a fun week, and we are going to break it all down. Before we do, you already know what time it is. I want to welcome back our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred app. Here's the deal. By now, you know Betfred's story, and I love telling it, okay? Started in 1967 in the UK, over 1,600 shops in the UK, and Betfred decided to come to the US and has made a major splash. They are the presenting gambling sponsor of the Cincinnati Bengals, of the Denver Broncos, of the Colorado Rockies. And what I love about working with Betfred, nobody does more for their customers than Betfred does. I've told you before, but we have sent listeners of this show to a Denver Broncos VIP tailgate. Cincinnati Bengals, they got a suite over there in Cincinnati I'm going to try to get to before the end of the year. They followed Mattress Mac around during the World Series. Mattress Mac placed some money with Betfred on that Astros World Series run. So nobody does more than Betfred, and I'll tell you this. They take great care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod and college football betting as well. Remember, bet 50 on any game this weekend. I don't care what game it is. USC-UCLA, Kentucky, Georgia, whatever game you want to bet on. Bet 50, you get $250 in free bets, courtesy of Betfred and the Betfred Sportsbook. Link will be in the show description, but mostly just want to thank Betfred. They've been an incredible partner for college football betting with Aaron Torres. And oh, by the way, we're going to have plenty more as we get close to college basketball. A couple other announcements. One, I'll be blunt. Don't really know what the taping schedule will be next week over the Thanksgiving holiday. I will be away. I will be working, obviously, with the college football that's coming up, college basketball as well, hosting some Fox Sports Radio. So I will keep you updated. Just follow my social media feed. Make sure you're subscribed because we will get an episode out sometime next week. Just not totally sure if it'll be a little bit earlier in the week, say Tuesday or Wednesday, or, of course, if it's a little bit later, say on Friday, on Black Friday after the holiday. Would be some great Black Friday listening, by the way, while you're standing in line shopping. Make sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever to get access to this show. Finally, make sure you're following on YouTube. And, yeah, we got big things coming. Appreciate Betfred's support. And with that said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into this Week 12 slate. And as I told you, a little bit of a different slate than usual. We're not leading with the SEC, not a ton of marquee SEC games this week. But even after last week where there was a little bit of chaos at the top, there are still two marquee Pac-12 games. Now, the Pac-12 games aren't necessarily for a college football playoff berth like we thought outside of USC, but there are still stakes in terms of the Pac-12 title race, in terms of the race for the Pac-12 championship in Vegas, and of course, a Rose Bowl and New Year's Six appearance. And so let's start with the big one. Frankly, it's about 10 minutes from where I'm recording right now. It is the UCLA Bruins hosting the USC Trojans. USC actually comes in, despite being the quote-unquote road team, as a 2.5-point favorite. The over-under at a staggering 76 points. So a couple things here right off the top. One, that number tells you this is going to be high scoring. It was very high scoring last year. Dorian Thompson-Robinson said, we want to put up another 60 on them. I think it's worth noting, great crowd expected at the Rose Bowl. I can tell you as somebody who lives in LA, I think it's probably going to be a pretty neutral crowd. So I don't think UCLA is going to have a significant home advantage. Ironically, I was talking to a buddy in LA about this on Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was. USC's campus is actually closer to UCLA's home venue, the Rose Bowl. So keep that in mind. No real home field advantage. But what I'll tell you is when these two teams get on the field, I think it's going to be absolutely a fascinating matchup of contrasting styles, especially on the offensive side of the football. With USC, listen, This is all you can ask for if you're USC, right? UCLA is coming off that loss to Arizona, and we know why they're coming off the loss to Arizona. It's because their secondary stinks. They can't stop anybody, and they had absolutely no answers for Jayden de Laura, the Arizona quarterback, last week. Arizona throws for 315 yards. Jayden de Laura, 23 of 29 passing, and literally UCLA's pass defense could not get off the field. The only time they were really leaving the field was after they gave up a touchdown. So that's great news for USC. That's great news for a USC team that throws the ball all over the field. This season, they currently rank in the top 10 nationally and number 3 in the Pac-12 behind Washington and Arizona in pass yardage. I think it'll be that much more important to get into a rhythm passing without Travis Dye. The star running back is hurt. That matters. But the good news is, of course, that you have Caleb Williams at quarterback. And I think it's actually really interesting. Like, I was thinking about this today. Is it possible that Caleb Williams, who was the number 1 recruit in America, the number 1 transfer last offseason, and will probably be almost certainly the number 1 pick in the 2024 NFL draft, is it possible that we're underrating him this season? Because I think that we are. His stats are absolutely unbelievable. 31 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. Now, the completion percentage is not through the roof. But when you look at the number of reasons why USC is having the success that they are, it is Caleb Williams. It is his success. And as we're going to talk about in a second with the USC defense, that matters because without Caleb Williams, this is an offense that needs to put up 40-plus points most nights to win. So the USC offense is rolling. The UCLA pass defense is abysmal, 102nd nationally, and that will absolutely be a factor in favor of USC on Saturday night at the Rose Bowl. Here's the counter to that, though. UCLA is going up against a very bad USC front seven and a very bad USC run defense. Now, USC statistically, if you look at things, the run defense isn't terrible. But if you look at USC in really, frankly, most of their games this year, this is a team that has, as I just said, struggled to stop the run. You go back to that Utah game a few weeks ago, and I know Utah's a great run offense. We're going to talk about them in a minute. But USC gave up 140 yards rushing, 5-6 yards per carry to Utah. You go back to a few weeks ago when USC played a few other teams. They have struggled to stop the run. And I look at this USC team, and I just mentioned it with their defense. The defense has struggled, and part of why Caleb Williams' season has become so interesting is because of the fact that, oh, by the way, this defense can't stop anybody. Yes, they won against Colorado last Friday night. Many of you watched it. But prior to that Colorado game, and Colorado might be the worst team in the Power 5, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Prior to that Colorado game, here's what they had given up on defense. 35 points in a 41-35 win over Cal. In that game, they gave up close to 500 yards of total offense. The game before, they played at Arizona. That was the game with the crazy play right before halftime. Lincoln Riley screaming at the refs. Well, it wasn't the refs' fault that you gave up 543 yards of total offense and 37 points in that game. And so you look at USC's last 3 games outside of Colorado last Friday. 42 points in a loss to Utah, 37 points in a win over Arizona, 35 points in a win over Cal. And what that says to me is pretty straightforward, right? The concern that we had for USC all season long hasn't really changed. We know that they have a Heisman caliber quarterback. We know that the skill position guys are on point. But to win at the highest level in college football, we know this. It's up front on defense. It's the D-line. It's the linebackers. I just don't think USC has those guys. And so that's especially concerning going up against the UCLA team. Are you ready for this? UCLA averages more yards per carry than any team in college football, okay? So, and by the way, it's not like they don't run the ball either. They run the ball quite often, but in terms of yards per carry, this was an insane stat that I could not believe when I saw it the first time. They're averaging close to 6.5 yards per carry, 29 rushing touchdowns, 240 yards rushing per game this season. And so I understand it's easy to get down on UCLA, excuse me. I understand. I get it. the frustration. They lose to Arizona as close to an 18, 19-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook. But when I look at this game, one, if it's going to be high scoring. Is it going to hit 76? Probably. Do I feel great about the over? I don't. But two, I do find it interesting, right? Over the last month, I think most people have kind of circled this game and said UCLA should be the favorite. The run offense is going to give USC fits. And now it's game week and USC is favored. And so my official Betfred Sportsbook pick, it is UCLA plus 2.5 at home. Listen, Lincoln Riley is so far ahead of schedule, it's laughable. I mean, this was a team, and they might still end up being a 9-3 regular season team. But I think most people kind of thought, okay, if you go 9-3 in year one, that is a rip-roaring success. Here he is at 9-1 with 2 games to go and a chance to win the Pac-12 and I believe make the college football playoff if they win out. I don't think they're going to win out, though. I do like UCLA plus the points. Let's get to the other big game in the Pac-12 and a kind of a similar storyline coming into this one, right? We thought this was going to be show me something Saturday, this current Saturday that we have right now. We thought this was going to be a de facto kind of semifinal to the Pac-12 championship, which might have been a playoff, have playoff implications. Well, UCLA loses last week. And of course, Oregon loses as well, 37-34. And the reason you listen to this podcast, as well as the Aaron Torres pod, is because I told you Oregon was going to have fits. Oregon is a great team. I think they're really talented, one of the most talented across the board rosters in college football. But the one thing they've struggled with all year long is in the secondary. They came in with the Pac-12's 11th ranked pass defense. And oh, by the way, they were playing the number 1 pass offense in college football. Got torched, not surprisingly, by Michael Penix, who finished with over 400 yards passing. And now you have a situation where Oregon's playing for nothing but pride and another Pac-12 title. I talked about it on the Aaron Torres pod. It's hard not to feel bad for Oregon, a team that in 3 of the last 4 years has entered November with a legitimate chance to make the playoff and has fallen short all 3 years. What I would also say on top of it, though, is this. Think about it. Your biggest weakness is going up against the team in the country that's best at exposing it last week in Washington, okay? And here's the thing. If Bo Nix doesn't get hurt on the second to last series, where you go 3 and out, you give the ball right back, Washington scores, you might win that game. And so I think about that from a few perspectives. One, that is the storyline coming into this week against Utah. Bo Nix, his health, does he play? This week, Dan Lanning, the head coach at Oregon, was very coy about the possibility. Basically said, we have faith in all 3 of our quarterbacks. That is not a good sign. Now, Ty Thompson, the backup, was a really highly rated recruit coming in. We have not seen very much of him. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like Bo Nix is going to play. And by the way, the Betfred Sportsbook reflects that as Oregon is a 2-point underdog at home against Utah with the over-under set at 62. So Oregon, which was a 14-point favorite last week at home against Washington, is now a 2-point favorite, or 2-point underdog. Either Utah is way better than we think, or Bo Nix probably won't play. The good news, if there is a silver lining for Oregon, it's what I just told you. That pass defense isn't good. I don't know that it comes into play on Saturday against Utah. Utah, once again, great running the football, excellent at what they do. They are not a very good passing team. Cam Rising has been up and down this year, about 66% completion percentage, 19 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. One of them, unfortunately, was on the goal line at Florida in week 1. But you look at the last 2 weeks, okay? Last 2 weeks, 13 of 25 passing for Cam Rising, 151 yards against Arizona, and 20 of 33, 219 yards passing last week against Stanford. So you do some math. 151 yards passing, 219 yards passing. That's an average of about what? 190 yards per game passing each of the last 2 weeks. Now, part of it was last week they were playing a bad Stanford team. They were able to run the ball right at them for over 300 yards rushing. So I get all that, or right around 300 yards rushing, a little bit under. But at the same time, I do think that Oregon, with that defensive front, with the way that they play up front, can slow down that Utah rush attack, right? I think it's easy to forget. Utah, I think, is a great team, good team, solid story, whatever. We watched them against UCLA. UCLA punked them at the line of scrimmage, and I think that can happen again this coming Saturday. Now, from the Oregon perspective, it comes down to really simply, What happens if Bo Nix doesn't play, and can they establish the run if Bo Nix isn't at 100%? Utah, a good run defense, top 30 in the country. In terms of the Pac-12, they actually rank number 3 behind Oregon and Oregon State. But Oregon is the team with that physical front that I think matches up really well with Utah. And Utah, the question is, can they stop the run and can they run the ball? That's really, if I had to just put this in one quick synopsis, okay? If I had to say one quick thing about this game, can Utah run the ball? Can Utah stop the run? Because if they do that, they're going to win and it's not going to be close. But I would also tell you, if I'm making a bet on this, and I don't know that I love either side because I don't know Bo Nix's status, I'll tell you what my bet would be. It would be the under of 62. And I think, one, if I'm a bettor, if I'm you, I sit back, I wait, I see, does Bo Nix actually play this week? Wait as long as you can to see if he's available before you place that bet. But 2, even if he does play, he's going to be at less than 100%. Oregon's going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to take the ball out of Bo Nix's hands to make things easier on him. And we know Utah wants to run the ball because they don't trust their quarterback either in Cam Rising. I think they trust him. I think they'd prefer to win the game on the ground, though, as opposed to trying to move the ball through the air. Over 400 rush attempts on the season for Utah shows you how much they are committed to the run. And if I had to make a bet Fred pick in this game, it would be the under of 62 points. Finally, let's go to the SEC. Like I said, not a huge slate of games this week. Alabama plays Austin Peay. We will not be breaking that down. LSU plays UAB. We will not be breaking it down. A&M is a 30-plus point favorite against UMass. We will absolutely not be breaking that down. You want to bet that one? Congrats to you. I'm staying as far away from that as I can. But at the same time, there is a game that's sort of interesting. Georgia travels to Kentucky. Georgia is a 22.5-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook. The over-under is 49.5. In a slow college football Saturday, this is your SEC game of the week. It'll be Brad Nessler and what's his face there, Gary Danielson. And what I would say is, let's talk about it. So Kentucky 6-4 coming off that loss to Vandy. We're going to get to them in a second. But on the flip side, I've been thinking a lot about Georgia. And it's kind of crazy to me. They're the best team in the country, in my opinion. It might not be close. I mean, the way they handle Tennessee. Now, I think if they play Tennessee again on a neutral, it would be more competitive. But at the same time, I think they take care of business against Michigan, Ohio State, certainly USC, certainly Clemson. So Georgia, to me, is the best team in the country. Here's the crazy part to me, though. I think they're getting better as the season goes on, which is scary for everybody else in college football. Obviously, we saw them 2 weeks ago against Tennessee in that de facto SEC East title game. But then last week, I think it's important to note. I mean, Mississippi State came in 6-3 and on the fringes of the top 25. They beat them 45-19 in a game that was not close. They finished with over close to 500 yards passing, average about 5.5 yards per carry. And here's the thing that I think stands out to me coming into this one. A week after they just completely shut down that Tennessee pass offense, they basically shut down the Mississippi State pass offense as well. Mississippi State came in averaging about 330 yards passing per game. They were held to 261 yards passing, about 5 yards per completion. So really limited the big plays from Mississippi State. And to me, that's kind of important coming into this one, and I'll tell you why. The reason it's important to me is because when I look at this game, think about it like this. So Kentucky really struggles to move the football on the ground, okay? They have one of the worst rushing attacks in the country, and I get it, right? Part of it is their best running back, Chris Rodriguez, wasn't available till about week 4 of the season. I get that happens. It doesn't change the fact that they rank 104th nationally in rushing. They actually have a worse rushing attack than Texas A&M, if you can believe that. And they have the second worst rush offense in the SEC behind only Mississippi State, who does not try to run the ball. And so why I bring it up, I think you know where I'm going with this. If you can't run the ball, and Tennessee and Mississippi State, they couldn't scheme open their wide receivers. In other words, Josh Heupel couldn't draw up a play to get his wide receivers open. I don't think Mark Stoops and Rich Scagnarello are going to be able to, nor are they going to be able to run the ball. And so I hate to be overly simplistic with the analysis here, but at the end of the day, if you can't run the ball, you're not going to be able to throw the ball on this Georgia secondary. This one could get ugly. I like Georgia minus the 22.5 in the Betfred Sportsbook. The other thing to consider, too, is the under of 49.5. Last 3 times these teams have played. 30-13 last year in Athens. 14-3 last time these two teams played in Lexington. 21-0 3 games ago when they played again in Athens in 2019. That was, I believe, in a monsoon. I think that was the year Lynn Bowden was the running back / wide receiver / quarterback for Kentucky. Point being, none of these games have gone over 43 in the last 3 years, and 2 of them have not gone over 21. The under is probably the smarter play. I also do like Georgia to cover the points. All right, so what I want to do, take a quick break. Do want to come back, and when I come back, we're going to hit on kind of a rapid-fire rest of the Week 12 slate. Cannot believe we're here. I have an interesting thought on Florida Vandy, Miami Clemson, Michigan, Illinois is sort of interesting. We'll talk about all of it. Take a quick break. Be right back. All right, let's get to the rest of the Week 12 slate. Obviously, look, it's a little bit of a quieter slate. We get that. Bottom line is next week, we're going to have a lot to talk about. Auburn, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State. It starts on Thursday night, Thanksgiving night, Black Friday into Saturday. So a ton of football to kind of get to next weekend. But right now, let's focus on the rest of Week 12. Again, by the way, I'm not quite sure yet on the taping schedule for next week. But anyway, enough talking. Week 12. Let's get to a game in the Big Ten. I'll say this. On paper, this one seemed a lot more interesting 2 weeks ago than it ended up being this week. I'm, of course, talking about Illinois, Michigan. Illinois is an 18-point underdog. Michigan, an 18-point favorite at home. Betfred Sportsbook, the over-under. How about this? 40.5. If you like old school 1960s, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, Big Ten football, oh my goodness, are you going to be in heaven in this game? Because both teams want to run the football, don't even want to try and do anything other than run the football. As a matter of fact, I was kind of blown away by this stat. One, we've talked about Michigan's run game before. Number 3 in the country in rushing yardage behind only Army and Air Force, who basically run the triple option, never pass the ball. How about this? They currently rank 115th in the country in pass attempts. They have attempted fewer passes than Iowa. They have attempted fewer passes than Kentucky, and we know how Mark Stoops likes to kind of hold on to the football, especially in big games. So it shows you how committed Michigan is to the run. But they're awesome, 10-0, playing to go to 11-0. And I think it'll be an interesting matchup with Illinois, because Illinois, one thing, we think Brett Bielema, the run offense, which we'll get into in a minute, but it's really the run defense, which has kept them in a lot of games this year. Currently number 6 in the country in total rush defense, behind only Michigan in the Big Ten. In the Power 5, only Michigan and Georgia are better. That's how good Brett Bielema has done this year, and only allowing 85 yards per game. Now, the question is, can they slow down this Michigan rushing attack that's run the ball on everybody? Well, we have seen kind of Michigan in a similar situation, right? Remember, early in the year, they played at Iowa. That game was close and low scoring for most of the game. It was 13-0 at halftime. It was 20-0 going into the fourth quarter. And it really wasn't until late that they pulled away from the Iowa Hawkeyes. And I could see a similar situation here. Listen, it's going to be cold. Now, that snow that's about to hit Buffalo, it looks like it's not going to impact this game one bit. But at the same time, I just think, Michigan, I don't think they'll be looking ahead, but it's senior day. I don't know. It just feels like this is a weird game. Now, the question for Illinois, of course, is can they do enough offensively to keep up with Michigan? And I just don't know. This is a team that, one, they want to run the ball as well. Chase Brown obviously has had an incredible year at the running back position for Illinois. Coming into this game, he is 2nd in the country in total rushing yards, 2nd in rushing yards per game. He actually leads the country in rushing yards, 2nd in rushing yards per game. I guess my concern would be, can they pass the ball, right? And that was the one thing, as I said, Illinois coming into this week was really hot, or coming into a few weeks ago, they were really hot, but they have lost their last 2 games. And really, the blueprint's been pretty simple. The other team has taken away the run, and they haven't been able to pass the ball. Last week, they played Purdue, 102 yards rushing for Illinois, 3 yards per carry. That's not going to get it done against Purdue, and that's not going to get it done against the run defense. So I would say if I had to place a bet, now this is one I'm not going to be playing, but if I was, I would probably just take Michigan. I would take Michigan minus the points. The 40.5 feels a little too low for me. I could see this game being, whatever, 28-10, then you're right on the cusp there, and then whatever. But if I had to play it, I would probably take Michigan minus 18. If you take Michigan minus 18, you probably want to take the over there. But I have no super strong bet on this game. A total. Stay away to me. Let's keep it going. A couple other games. One, I'll say this, a couple things. Game that looked really awesome on paper in August and September. Miami at Clemson. It ain't going to be that this weekend as Miami goes in as a 19-point underdog, Clemson a 19-point favorite. Over under set at 48 in the Betfred Sportsbook. Again, felt big on paper. Thought Miami was going to be good. They are not good. But as we come into this game, one, there's actually real stakes for both teams, okay? Clemson, this idea that Clemson can't make the playoff is just idiotic. Can we stop? We've had one power conference team that has not made the playoff in the history of the college football playoff as a 0 or 1 loss power conference champ. That was Ohio State in 2018. And that was only because we had a bunch of 1-loss teams ahead of them. That was the year Bama, Clemson were undefeated, Notre Dame was undefeated, and Oklahoma with Kyler Murray had just 1 loss. And so because of it, that was the only time that a 1-loss team has been left out. And if Clemson wins out, they're going to be in great position. I can't sit here and say definitively that they'll be in, but I also can't sit here and say that they'll be out if they win out, because remember, they would also have to play North Carolina, a team currently ranked in the top 15. That loss to Notre Dame might not look so bad depending on what Notre Dame does against USC. So the point I'm trying to make is it is far from saying Clemson is out of the playoff picture. And at the same time, Miami has something at stake too. It's been an awful year, but they're 5-5 right now. Obviously, they win this game. It makes the season. It builds momentum going into the recruiting cycle. It also gets them bowl eligible at 6-5. If they don't win this game, they would have to win against Pitt at home next week. Don't know what the crowd for Pitt on Thanksgiving weekend will be like in Miami for a game there. But I just bring it up because there's a lot at stake for both teams. To Miami's credit, if you want to call it that, they are coming off a win against Georgia Tech. They've been a weird team all year. Basically alternated wins and losses in their last 5. Beat Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech, lost to Duke. Beat Virginia, lost to Florida State, beat Georgia Tech. I do think their back's up against the wall. The one thing that stands out to me about that win the other day, 2 things really. One, playing their 3rd different quarterback this year. Started with Tyler Van Dyke, Jake Garcia, now to Ja'Cory Brown. What's interesting about that, though, is that Ja'Cory Brown, they really basically took the ball out of his hands and just ran the football right at Georgia Tech last week, and Georgia Tech had no answers. Finished the game last week with 217 yards rushing. That's Miami. And I guess my big question is, can they do that against a Clemson rush defense, which has been really good this year? Now, Clemson's rush defense has had its moments. Not good against Florida State. I think Florida State's just a really good team, though. And the rush defense wasn't good against Notre Dame. I just don't know that Miami has the dudes that Notre Dame or that Florida State has in year 1 of the Mario Cristobal rebuild, especially on the offensive line, especially in the run game. I would lean the under in this game, because I'm just not sure that Clemson can move the ball against a pretty good Miami run defense as well. Now, Miami's far from elite in run defense, but in terms of teams that Clemson has seen this year, they're right up towards the top. 5th in the ACC, top 30 nationally in rush defense, 125 yards per game. And Clemson, listen, we've danced around the DJ stuff all year. We've tried to give him credit. We've tried to give him discredit, whatever. But last Saturday against Louisville, it was another game where they took the ball out of DJ's hands, 191 yards passing, and they really put the ball in the running back's hands. Obviously, Will Shipley and some others had big games there. I don't expect a lot of points in this one. If I had to take anything, I would probably take the under, because I think Miami struggles to move the ball, and I think Clemson could struggle to move the ball as well. One game where I don't think we're going to see people struggling to move the ball, it is Florida playing at Miami. Man, I'm all over the place right now. Let's wrap up this show because I'm starting to lose it here. Florida is at Vandy. Vandy is a 14-point home underdog, meaning Florida is a 14-point favorite. The over-under set at 57.5. And as I just said, I don't think either team's going to struggle to move the ball. Let me explain why. From the Florida perspective, I got to give that team credit, right? Because on this show, for the last couple weeks, I've said, I don't know if Florida's very good. I don't really know what they do well. Well, there is one thing that they have proven to do well here over the last couple weeks, and that's this. They can run the football. And at first, when I saw all kind of the rushing numbers, I said, whoa, wait a second now. Anthony Richardson is a big part of that rush offense? And are they really running the ball well, or is Anthony Richardson just being awesome? Well, turns out, no. You look at this Florida rush offense. I mean, I got to tell you about what Florida did last week. For people who missed it against South Carolina last week, how about this? This is unbelievable. Florida in the South Carolina game, they rushed for, are you ready for this? They rushed for 374 yards rushing. And in that game, and I thought this was the interesting part, Anthony Richardson had 96 yards. They had two separate backs, Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson, go for over 100 yards apiece. So you almost had three different players go for over 100 yards against South Carolina. Maybe that says something about South Carolina, but it's worth noting that the week before against Texas A&M, that Florida was able to rush for 291 yards against Texas A&M. And also, it's worth noting that Vanderbilt's rush defense is not very good. You look at Vandy, they rank 90th nationally in college football in run defense. But you know who else doesn't stop the run either? The Florida Gators. You know who else is coming off a big win? How about those Vandy Commodores? Credit to that group for sticking together, for playing together, and for getting the win at Kentucky. And they did it by moving the ball on the ground. 224 yards versus that Kentucky run defense. And so I look at this game. I don't know that either team can stop the run. I do think Florida wins. I don't love the spread, even though Florida's going to win because I give them credit. They've been playing really good football since that Georgia game. Second half, they kind of narrow it. Georgia's obviously too good, but they've won 2 games since. I think they make it 3 in a row. I do like the over in this game. You know, another SEC game that's interesting. Ole Miss is a 2.5-point favorite at Arkansas in the Betfred Sportsbook. The over-under in this one from the Ole Miss Arkansas game is, let me look it up here. I thought I had it, but it is 64. So a few things stand out. One, I think Arkansas is just really hard to bet. You know, we've seen so much different, you know, they've had good days, they've had bad days. The defense is good. Then the offense struggles, vice versa. You know, KJ Jefferson's been great, but he's been banged up. And so you look at this Arkansas team, I don't think we know what we get out of them. But I thought my buddy John Neighbors, who hosts radio down in Arkansas, brought up a great point. Who is Ole Miss's best win? Like Ole Miss right now, they have, 8 wins? They're looking good. Everybody likes them. They're awesome. Lane Kiffin, maybe he's the next Auburn head coach. I don't know. Here's who Ole Miss has beaten this year. Troy, Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, Tulsa. I'm still waiting for the marquee win there. Kentucky, Vandy, Auburn, Texas A&M. So their 3 SEC wins are against the 2 worst teams in their 4 SEC wins, excuse me. The 2 worst teams in the SEC West, Texas A&M and Auburn. The worst team in the SEC East, Vanderbilt. And Kentucky, 6-4, just lost to Vandy. So Ole Miss's best win is probably Kentucky at home. Maybe Troy if you believe in Troy. And I think this is interesting too. Coming off an emotional loss to Alabama. Remember, after the game, Lane Kiffin basically said, "We come here to win these games." And I'm not like making fun of him for it, but you think there's an emotional letdown. You play at Arkansas in a night game. It's going to be very cold. Also, Arkansas, they're trying to get bowl eligible, try to salvage this season to get into next year. And the other thing that stands out, I just think this is probably a body blow game for Ole Miss. I'm not going to bet it. I'm not going to go super strong. I'm picking Arkansas to pull off the upset, though. That would be where I would lean. A 2.5-point favorite at home easily could have beaten LSU last week. Doesn't take care of business. I think they get it done against Ole Miss. You know, a couple other games, just total stayaways to me. I can't get excited. TCU, I find it very interesting. Early kickoff against Baylor, a 2.5-point favorite. I'm done trying to figure out TCU. You know, just when we think they're going to lose, they win. Just when we think they're going to have a bad first half, they play great. Just when we think the defense can't stop anybody, they were awesome against Texas. I will not be betting that game. Speaking of Texas, the revenge game against Kansas, they're a 9-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook. That is a 4:30 Eastern kickoff. Texas historically has not played great in the state of Kansas. We talked about this a few weeks ago when they played at Kansas State. It's going to be cold, about 35 degrees. This is a late kickoff, a 7:30 Eastern time kickoff. And so when I look at this game, If you want to try to handicap this, I stand corrected. It's a 3:30 game. If you want to try to handicap this game, good for you. Texas is so inconsistent. I can't bet my money on it. I just can't bet my money on it. Same with a couple of these Big Ten games. Wisconsin, a 10-point favorite over Nebraska. Both these schools looking for new head coaches, just don't feel great about either side. Minnesota, a 2.5-point favorite against Iowa. How about this? The over under 32.5 points. You can't make this stuff up. The Minnesota Golden Gophers and the Iowa Hawkeyes, by the way, and this is very interesting. This is something to keep an eye on. They are both very much in the mix for the Big Ten West title. Purdue, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, all tied atop the standings. I think Purdue probably has the best track. By the way, I picked Purdue in the preseason. If you listen to this show, they were my favorite over-under bet in the Big Ten West. But Purdue is 6-4. Their games are against Northwestern and Indiana, the two worst teams in this league to close the season. But Minnesota and Iowa still playing for a trip to the Big Ten championship game. And I think that's it. No more hot takes, big bets for me. Auburn, how about this? A 5.5-point favorite at home against Western Kentucky. North Carolina is an interesting one to watch. 21-point favorite against Georgia Tech. North Carolina, of course, will be playing Clemson next week or 2 weeks from now for an ACC championship. With that said, I think it's time for me to get out of here. That is enough college football betting for one day. Before we go, one, I appreciate your support. This show has been awesome. This show has grown over the course of the season. And we're going to keep going. We're going to have bowl preview, college football playoff preview, national championship preview. So make sure to pay attention for all of that. If you're not subscribed, please make sure to do so. Go find the YouTube channel. If you can follow us over on YouTube, that really would help us grow as well. I think that's it. Going to be a fun weekend. Those big Pac-12 games. And here's the good part. Next week, we got Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn, Iron Bowl. You may have heard of it. South Carolina versus Clemson, Florida State. We got a loaded slate next week, but enjoy the games this Saturday, last full weekend before we get to the Thanksgiving holiday. And by the way, don't know if I'll be talking to you guys and girls before Thanksgiving. I think I probably will, but I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. I hope everybody enjoys time with friends and family. Cherish these moments. You never get them back. That's my speech for today. I'm out.